Okay, story time. This is the Dear Nami Broadcast, and this is a special episode where I'm going to read to you a chapter in this book, Her Coronation. It's a chapter I wrote. It's a book that I wrote with 17 other women. If you haven't checked it out, it's called Her Coronation, and it's sacred stories of initiation and spiritual sovereignty. So, as my end of the year holiday episode, I decided to allow you to get to know me a little bit better by telling you a story of how 3 women initiated me into the feminine and got me to actually where I am today, living in this yurt and having this beautiful fireplace. I'm going to thank my masculine divine for that as well, my husband. But here is the story. It's called The Traveler, the Midwife, and the Enchantress by Jen Nami Padgett. This is the worst idea that you've ever had in your life, the kid's paternal grandfather, Bob, said, after I told him of my plan to buy a yurt and go live off the grid in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Perhaps he was right. I mean, he had no idea I'd been researching yurts and off-grid living for the last 7 or 8 years, and the first time I heard of yurts from my roommate, I thought she was crazy too. When I look back on it, I now know that this roommate was one of my first initiators of the goddess, but I wouldn't know of this or understand it until many years later. I was a 24-year-old single mother of my daughter Sierra in 1998 when I scraped together enough funds to buy a 3-bedroom condo in Arizona. Property was so reasonably priced that once the down payment was taken care of, my monthly payments were cheaper than the rent I had been paying in my previous place. At the time, I was managing a bar. A referral from one of the owners, Susan, walked through the door, so I had no choice but to add her to the schedule. She started out working days like all new staff, so there was a lot of downtime for me to get to know her. Before becoming a mother, Susan was a traveler, something I had been saving to do before getting pregnant. I was entranced by her and her stories of living in Hawaii in a Volkswagen bus, in Alaska on a fishing boat, being chased by a bear in a cabin in the woods, making her way to Europe, meeting the father of her child, recording music, living in San Francisco with access to bookstores with books the rest of the world did not know about, and even stories of times she experienced astral projection. I was so happy to live vicariously through her as she told these stories so vividly. It seemed like I was right there with her. How delighted was I to have this new friend with the raucous laugh and the bright smile, who I felt was so much more interesting than myself. A new confidant, and one always telling me, little old me, how awesome I was. She even told me one day that I looked like a high priestess, the first time I had ever heard that term. Susan had some ongoing problems with the father of her child, and one day they got into a huge argument, so I invited her to come stay with me at my condo for the weekend. I told her she could stay if it got to the end of the weekend and she didn't want to go back. She stayed. For the next 2 years, we were single mothers raising our children and her dog Buddha together. Her son was only 3 months younger than my daughter, and they too became fast friends and are still good friends to this day. We cooked meals together and for each other, watched each other's kids so we could have time out by ourselves, spotted each other when we were low on funds. We drink red wine. I hated red wine before she introduced me to a good bottle. And she'd play guitar while we sang songs she wrote. And also Stevie Nicks, Jewel, Neil Young, and everything in between on the back porch together. Susan had a powerful energy, and when she would get upset, electrical things would blow up. The light bulb in our hallway blew out several times. The toaster oven caught on fire, and even her car wouldn't start some days. I'd have to take my grounded Cancer Taurus self out to our car park and have her go inside so I could start it for her. On the nights we worked late together or got a rare night out on the town, we'd come home and she'd make a pot roast with all the fixings in the middle of the night. We struggled as low-income mothers, not receiving any child support, but it was a magical time. One day, probably restless and wishing for the nomadic life she used to have, Susan said, "I'm tired of squares and rectangles. We should go live in a yurt together." I asked, "What the heck is a yurt?" So she explained that it was a round house that Mongolians live in on the tundra, a movable structure, kind of like a teepee, but not a teepee. "Like you and me, and two 2-year-olds in a yurt?" I said. "Why not?" she asked. I thought it was crazy and laughed it off, pretty much shutting down the conversation right then. I have a seriously curious nature, though. Since I didn't know anything about yurts, I decided I needed to know more. The internet was becoming more usable back then, so I looked up yurts. As I saw the pictures of yurts and read about the history and how strong the design structure was, I fell in love with the idea. I still did not think it was something I would be able to do or pull off at the time, but I think I became mildly obsessed and did a lot of research about off-grid living, putting solar systems and alternative water collection systems together and raising your own food. Over the following years, I couldn't get the idea out of my mind. Each time I'd think about moving, I'd pick up my research. I'd pick it back up, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I might do such a thing. Each time I moved, I let the idea go, because who was I to try to do something like this? After all, I was a single mother, and wasn't it irresponsible to go live a life I had no experience with and drag my kid along for the ride? I also had a picture in my head of the white picket fence life and having a husband with a family someday. Part of me was holding out for that vision and waiting for a mate to settle down and start my real life. Fast forward about 5 years, and I'm now living in California with my daughter's paternal grandparents, Bob and Judy, whom I've known since I was 18 and are like a second set of parents to me. They had just gotten permanent guardianship over 4 of their grandchildren, who were half and step siblings to my daughter. In the first year they had the kids, Sierra and I visited, and I talked to them on the phone many times about all they were trying to manage, raising grandkids that spanned in age from 13 years to 5 months old. The kids' bio parents were in and out of jail and in the throes of addiction, not allowing them to be present caregivers. It was a rough time for Bob and Judy, managing a full house that needed constant support and attention. We explored the idea of me moving to California to help with the kids, and so that Sierra could be close to her siblings. I took a full 6 months to decide if this was the right choice, because I knew if I did move, I'd become a parental figure, and I wanted to make sure that I could carry out that commitment for a lifetime. It was an easy time to make a transition. Susan had moved out and bought her own place, and I was doing accounting consulting, a very transferable skill. I was getting a big yes every time I thought about going. I was being called to go, and with every fiber of my being, I knew it was the right thing to do. After saying yes, it took another 6 months to finalize plans, finish up with my consulting clients, pack up, and move. The next few years were absolute chaos. Now I lived in a household of 3 adults, a teenager, and 4 children under 6. Every day there was a breakdown, if not one of the kids, one of us adults. We assembly line getting ready for school and church and meals. There were doctor, dentist, and counseling appointments, IEP meetings at school, court and lawyer meetings, calls from drug-addicted parents, finding support systems outside the family, school activities, beach trips, and family vacations. We adults would joke with one another, "Could you put me in timeout, please?" After seeing myself and each one of the kids at different stages of my childhood, I called my mother 6 months in and apologized for everything I had ever done in my entire life, which I'm sure provided much amusement. Our main goal was keeping the children together and safe, and a secondary goal was that if their parents could get better, that there would be a reconciliation period and transfer of custody back. Our third goal was getting Bob and Judy eventually back to the grandparent role, if it was possible. It took several years from the time the kids moved to California for this to happen. Eventually, Bob and Judy's son, my ex, moved to California to start the reunification process of his younger two. The oldest moved at 16 to live with an aunt back in Arizona, and that left Hannah a year older than Sierra. Hannah was not a blood relative, so it was unlikely that her stepfather, with his legal history, would be able to get custody along with his younger two. Hannah and I had become very close, so it was decided that I would pursue guardianship of her because her mother was not ready for reunification. We all still lived in California, but I moved out to an apartment with Hannah and Sierra. We kept all the kids in the same school, and they spent afternoons with their grandparents, just like when they lived there. Everyone worked together to reunify the younger two kids with their father over the next couple of years. I was in the apartment for a year and then moved to a house down the road from Bob and Judy. At each point of moving, I considered doing the yurt thing, but I kept any mention of it to myself as I knew it was too wild of an idea to discuss with most people. Moving first to the apartment and then to the house was what I thought was the responsible thing to do. After all, I was now a single mother of two girls. The apartments did not end up being kid-friendly, so I only stayed for my year lease. The house was great. I had searched high and low for that place, a place I could afford that was just inside the kids' current school district. When I found the house, I was told they wanted a long-term renters, and the last renters had been there for 15 years. I thought, great! I can stay here until my kids get all the way through high school. The house went into foreclosure 6 months later. It was at this point I thought, fuck it. I'm gonna go do the yurt thing. I think Goddess was working her magic in the background because to afford the rental house, I had to sublet one of the bedrooms. I ended up renting to Diana, a Midwestern girl with dreads who was a midwife. Her boyfriend stayed over a lot. He was a musician, so there was more times for me to hang out, listening to him play guitar and sing in the backyard, and getting to know this new set of friends. Friends I could talk to about and explore the idea of yurts and living off the grid with. When I shared the news of the rental house being in foreclosure and that we would all have to find new places to live, I told them I was going to find a yurt and move to the mountains. They were fully supportive of the idea and said they would help me if I found a place. I had 6 months to figure it out before we had to go, so I pulled out my old files of research and ramped up the serious pursuit of all it would take to move and live off the grid in the yurt. The internet was more flush with information, so I was able to figure out how to do the basics of everything. I looked for places that already had a yurt set up and couldn't find any. I started searching for used yurts because I knew I couldn't afford a new one. 3 months into my research, I felt I knew enough that I could pull this off. Now I just needed a place I could put a yurt and then to find one. I placed an ad on Craigslist that said, looking for a property to rent that I can put a yurt on that has access to water. I'm a single mom with 2 kids and we would like to have a dog. Within 12 hours, I got a response, my only response, from a guy named Capono who lived in the Santa Cruz Mountains and in the school district that I wanted. Capono, by the way, means righteous God in Hawaiian. His response to my ad was, I think I have the perfect spot. The following Saturday, we left the kids at their grandparents', who still didn't know of my yurt plans, and Diana and I drove up to the mountains to take a look. We pulled off the main road onto a road that was a single lane with pullouts, which eventually turned into dirt, and 2 miles seemed like 10. Luckily, my roommate had an adventurous spirit and encouraged me to continue, even though I was thinking this may be a little too far out for my commute to work and getting kids to school. It's not lost on me that this midwife birthing babies also midwifed me through a very important time of my life. We finally found the property. Capono took us to a spot on his 10-acre property with its own driveway, walked up Oh, sorry. We finally found the property. Capono took us to a spot on his 10-acre property with its own driveway, walked up, turned to his right, spread his arms wide, and said, "This is where I was thinking would be the perfect spot." It was a clearing in the redwood forest, a grassy knoll on a little hillside that honestly looked like a magical fairyland, and I saw exactly where the yurt would go. It was absolutely the perfect spot. We all agreed. So we figured out a fair price for rent, and I discussed other logistics with Capono. I was so happy to have found the place. Now I just needed to find a yurt to go on this beautiful spot, and I began furiously searching for one. Craigslist and Google were my best friends in my search, as at the time, there were not many yurt forums online. I looked all over the United States, and I found one in Ohio I was considering. It was January, and I don't really know what I was thinking, because it's a horrible time of year to take down a yurt and move it, and I'm sure that made the pickings very slim. I finally found a great prospect in Oregon in the Applegate Valley, about a 6-hour drive away from where I lived. I talked with the couple and convinced them how serious I was, and they had a lot of interest. I wanted to come up and take a look and put a deposit on it, which they agreed to. I decided it was time to tell Bob and Judy of my plans. So one night when Bob was dropping the girls at my house, I told him my plans. That's when I got the worst idea you've ever had in your life talk. But it was too late. I already had the land I wanted, and I was about to go up and put a deposit down on the yurt if it was in good condition. I took Hannah and Sierra with me for the weekend up to Oregon. The Applegate Valley, when winter is turning into spring, is another magical fairyland, and it looks like pictures of Ireland. As we drove into the valley, Hannah sat straight up in her seat and began staring out the window, mesmerized. Like somewhere deep in her soul, she recognized this place. "Mom, I want to live here. We need to live here. This is where we're supposed to live," she insisted. I tell this part of the story because I felt her longing so much, I almost considered looking for a place up there while we were there. It was too much to consider with all the other logistics in play, but I do believe that Goddess was awakening her to something back then. Perhaps someday she will end up back in the Applegate Valley or somewhere just like it, living out her dreams. At 19, I had this same awakening at the Mogollon Rim in Arizona. I sat on the rim looking down the mountain and valley filled with pine trees and mountain greenery. I saw little plumes of dirt quickly moving through the trees, and I realized that it was some sort of vehicle driving down a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. I thought to myself, someday I'm going to live there. Years later, I was sitting at the top of the road where my yurt is now and saw the same plume of dirt moving through the redwoods, and I realized I'm there. I finally made it. Back to Oregon. When we made it to the property the yurt was on, the couple selling it showed us all around, pointing out places that may need attention later. The yurt was 13 years old, but in very good condition. They took my girls outside to play and suggested that I spend some time alone inside to see if it was the right fit for us. I kind of giggled inside because, while I understood energetic kinship a little, it seemed so very silly to spend time with an inanimate object. However, this place was special, and as I spent time alone inside, I found myself asking questions like, will you take care of us? Will you allow me to take you from this spot, and will we have a good life? I walked around in circles, stopping to look out the windows and to study the tiny shelves and the kitchen the couple had created, imagining what I would do once I got her home and had her up on my property. It was another big yes in my life, and I knew our little family was meant to live in this yurt. I knew that I didn't have to wait for a man to be in my life to follow my dreams and be courageous, that we would have enough. So I gave the couple a deposit and made plans to come back and get it within a few weeks, and hang on and I'll be right back. the cooking timer. Okay. So, back at home, I started ordering and looking for the stuff I would need to put together. A tiny solar power system, a composting toilet, a propane fridge, a clawfoot tub. More of a want than a need. And materials to build the platform for the yurt. I had to figure out a plan to get all of the materials I would need to the property in the mountains. My Toyota Corolla wouldn't do to haul most of this stuff, so I decided to look for a cheap truck. I thought it would be perfect if I could find a $500 truck, and I didn't want to pay more than $700. Again, back to Craigslist, and nothing near this price. I look back and laugh because there were so many things that I wanted that were probably a ridiculous ask, but I put it out there anyway. I kept seeing this Ford truck on Craigslist. First at $1,500, then $1,300, then $950, which is when I decided to call about it. The night I went to take a look, I was talking to the guy. As I was talking to the guy, he told me it was a reliable truck, but that it had started to have issues every once in a while with the transmission. He said his mechanic said the transmission could go in 6 months or it could be a few years. Then, without me saying anything, he said, "How about I give it to you for $700? I was floored and amused and thrilled that I had a working truck for the price I had capped myself at. I only needed it for a short time to haul stuff, but that truck ended up lasting several years. This is where I have to stop and talk about the magic of the universe. I didn't know I was getting a big wink from the goddess back then. I didn't even know that about the goddess or divine feminine energy. But I believed now that I was fully experiencing the power of this energy, and I was soaking it up. I believe when you are doing something you are meant to do, the universe fully supports you. I know that if we are aware, we can notice the little nods and winks from the goddess. And I was definitely getting all of the signals for a full-blown yes on the pursuit of this dream. Even Bob telling me that it was a terrible idea was a push I needed, because back then I still felt that I had things to prove. Telling me no was not a great idea if you didn't want me to do something. Every step of getting the yurt up and a livable space on the mountain, I had assistance, and a lot of help came out of nowhere at the exact time I needed it. The mountain neighborhood I moved into were all off-the-grid folks, some of whom had established the neighborhood in the 70s when the roads were old logging trails. Time and time again, a curious neighbor would show up to see what this new girl with the yurt was up to and offer help. I was washing the covers one day, a huge job, and someone showed up and assisted. Another day, I was trying to thread the yurt roof to the yurt walls with parachute rope, not an easy task to do by yourself. Discouraged at the halfway point, I was getting ready to leave when another neighbor pulled into the drive behind me. When I explained what I was trying to do, he went to get his son and they helped me finish the job. So many occurrences like this happened that one day when I was driving the truck up the road and it died on me, the next person that drove up on me said, "You'll never guess what I do for a living." I said, "I bet you are a mechanic." He was, and he easily fixed my loose battery cables and got me back on the road in no time. Even Bob and Judy, my ex, and my folks helped at various times throughout the process. Wink, wink, nod, nod. It was the essence of this time in my life when I was at a place where I was truly living in my power. As we settled into our new lives on the mountain, our little family became part of a mountain family. Surrounding the year I moved, several others from my generation moved there too, and there were kids around the same age as my daughters. We were graciously accepted by all. We gathered together as a mountain family, sharing meals and campfires and songs together. The roommates who helped me go get the yurt and then put it up in the mountains didn't move with me, but came down to the mountain to hang out often and became part of the mountain family too. My job at the time was working in homeless services where there's an emergency assistance network, EAN. One day, getting ready to head to work, I locked my keys in the car. All I had to do was walk to the end of my driveway, and everyone who passed by on their way to work tried to help. One neighbor had AAA, so she convinced the driver to come all the way down to my place to unlock the door. Arriving at work, I was so grateful for all the love and life this neighborhood provided me that I thought, it's like the Mountain Emergency Assistance Network. I acronymed it, and I was delighted when I realized it spelled mean. So I made a post on Facebook about mean, M-E-A-N, in big capital letters. Can you see it? Yes. Okay, that was reversed, but you get the idea. I made the post on Facebook about mean, thanking my neighbors and saying it's like a big Papa Bear kind of mean, the kind that will take care of you no matter what mean, and our neighborhood name was born. One neighbor made a Facebook group called Mean for our neighborhood communications, and another designed a logo that we put on tank tops and sweatshirts, and all that still exists to this day. Another powerful woman in my life, Christy, a healer and enchantress, came to visit for a long weekend a few months after I moved in. That weekend, we had one of the biggest storms in California in 20 years, with wind gusts up to 90 miles an hour and sheets of rain pelting down on the yurt with a fury I haven't seen since. The yurt started leaking in several spots, with a major one coming in by the wood stove pipe outlet. We started with towels and then blankets to sop up all the water, and then would run down the muddy hill to the pole barn where we had a campfire to hang and dry them. We drank whiskey and giggled and somehow survived the night intact. The next day, the storm had gone, and we were sitting out by the fire. We had kept going all night. Christy exclaimed, "You know what you need?" "What?" I queried. "Jesus." Jesus was a carpenter. We laughed and giggled even more, but I believe it was at that moment that Christy made a powerful call out to the universe for me. I have never been able to do anything besides connect the dots between that moment and the day I met my future husband. Another wink, another nod. If you know Christy, you know that she is just the kind of woman to do this sort of thing. About a month after Christy left to go back home, I was down at the creek hanging with my kids and some others. A couple of strange vehicles were coming down to the creek, so we stopped them to see if they were lost. We knew nearly everyone, and if someone's coming that far down the road, we wanted to know them or send them back in the right direction. It was new neighbors moving in, their trucks packed with belongings. The first vehicle stopped and chatted with us for several minutes. I was having my very first yurt gathering where I had invited the whole mountain, so I invited this new couple. The man in the truck behind them waited so patiently while we chatted with his roommates, so when it was his turn to pass by, I stopped him and thanked him and invited him too. That man was the man that would become my husband, my beloved. Later, after we got together, he said he knew that day as soon as he saw me that I was the one. He said I had a white aura light and glow all around me. And guess what? Yes, he is a carpenter. I had stood in my power. I had put myself in the place I wanted to be, and Goddess responded with so many gifts. This is one of the many magical times in my life, and one I can look back on now and clearly see all of the divine intervention that was happening to get me exactly to the place I needed to be. 15 years later, we still live on the same mountain in the same yurt with a carpenter for a husband who brought along a daughter of his own. Our lives and living situation greatly improved. No more leaks, among the many other things he's done. He healed my heart, and he's been so supportive of any path that I choose. I don't know if I could have lived so comfortably in the mountain or explored the priestess path so fully with a different partner, and certainly none of the partners I had previously. Hannah reunited and moved to live with her mom when she was 14, but she came back as a young adult with a baby of her own to live with us a couple of times before finding her path. The younger two kids earlier in the story, they also came back and lived with us during their high school years, and the oldest is now a mother and an herbalist We actually took our first herbal class together. They all came back for summers and holidays and vacations, regardless of their age. I'm still a mama to them, and we all remain very connected. Being out here in the wild has allowed me to explore and learn so many things. I sat outside this morning at the break of dawn, listening to the birds start their morning twittering, feeling the warmth of the sun starting to rise, and a cool breeze brush across my skin. A glorious awakening of the day. I am thankful to be as loud or as quiet as I want to be, and to have this space, an energetic portal really, to keep discovering who I am. I have become an herbalist, an energy worker, and a priestess here. I don't think I had any choice but to step up into my power and do what I did. I was meant to be on this path so I could get to the priestess path I'm on now. She built up the support systems I needed. She provided. She loved. She is me. She is you. She is all of us. I answered the call, and I'm so thankful I did. I can't wait for what's next. Thank you for listening. I know that was a long story, so if you made it all the way through, I really appreciate it. If you haven't seen this book before, it's called Her Coronation. Again, Sacred Stories of Initiation and Spiritual Sovereignty. It's available at River Sanctuary Publishing, and it is also available on Amazon. And it's available through any of the authors on the book. So if you look it up, you can find the authors, and if you recognize one of them, contact them. Contact me if you'd like to buy directly from the publisher and myself. And if any of the authors are listening to this story and they would like to read their story as a guest speaker on the Everyday Priestess Channel, I would invite you to do that, because there are some amazing stories in this book, and I always love hearing it in the voice of the author. Yeah, so happy holidays to everyone. The Everyday Priestess Channel is my gift and Phelan Shiva's. She's the co-founder with me. It's our gift to the world. So there's several episodes that you can take a look at or listen to that we've both created throughout the course of this last year. And yeah, it's our love letter to the world, and allows us to share a little piece of us and priestessing, the priestessing world and the magical ethereal world with those who are interested and just want to step into this work and see what it's all about, or step onto the path. And if you are feeling like you want to engage more, then contact me. All the contact details are below this video in the comments. Okay. Blessings, my beloveds. Goodbye.